So I just need a button I can press to move to the next slide. Yeah. Yeah, the keys are fine, I guess. All right, cool. So just in case you haven't heard enough about Start HQ, this is kind of Start HQ related as well, but it's about something completely different. So now rather than talking about the server side, I'm going to talk about our experience writing browser extensions. So just to give a bit of background, Start HQ kind of has two parts. There's the directory bit, which lists all the web apps, which is a Node.js server, and we use Phantom and Angular and a bunch of other things. But then there's the part kind of behind the login, which is supposed to be an app launcher. So it's kind of something that replaces your new tab page in Chrome. And we implemented that functionality across other browsers as well. And initially, we wrote extensions to be able to simply replace the new tab, right? You can't have a site do that. That needs to be an extension. So we started with that, but then we've been adding more features. So now we kind of rely rather heavily on having an extension for the launcher part of Start HQ. But in general, there are some good solid reasons why you should write extensions. I mean, I guess the first one, which is kind of obvious, which is why we're all here, is that everything is kind of moving to the web. Even F-Secure is using HTML5 for its front end. So essentially, the browser is becoming the OS. But the browser landscape is kind of fragmented. Yet, if you want to offer any sort of more low-level functionality, you don't really have that many cross-platform options. And extensions are like a good solution there because they do allow for extra functionality. Like access to the file system, access to browsing history. You can even access some native APIs if you want. That's kind of the technical reason, though, but there's also a kind of a user experience reason for using extensions. And that reason is that there are more and more apps and services competing for the user's attention. And if you want, unless you're like Facebook or Google, it's really hard to get people to come back to your site. So the nice thing about extensions is that they can be unobtrusive and contextual. So they can kind of show or expose some of the functionality inside your website or inside your web app, as and when they need to, and they can even do it inside other applications, or they can do it inside the browser Chrome. So they can like show a pop-up, a notification. They can show a icon next to your URL bar, right? And I think that that's hugely important. So that there's a bunch of applications that are out there that I think a lot of people use. If you look at the stats on like the Google Chrome store, there are some extensions that have like millions of installs, which is more than most websites, right? Cool. So what are like some similarities when it comes to extensions? Well, regardless of which browser you're building the extension for, they all have sort of similar components, but they use slightly different terminology. So one which is quite common is the so-called background page. If you think about it, when you start up your browser, the extension may need to initialize itself somehow. Now it can't do it in a page that's visible to a user because typically the initialization has to happen before the user sees anything. So each extension gets a page that's in the background, which is a full-blown HTML page, except that its contents are never displayed to the user, right? So it's a page that's loaded, never shown, and has access to some of the sort of extension APIs that the extension can use to bootstrap itself. What it can also do is it can modify the browser Chrome, so it can add like components to the browsers. So, for example, in the case of Chrome or Firefox, you can go in and inject like a button to be right next to the URL bar if you want. Another type of a way in which extensions can interact with the user is through content scripts. So content scripts are scripts or other static resources that get injected into a user's page as they're browsing around, right? Without the user kind of explicitly having to load them. So the way it works is each extension tells the browser add my code into the pages that match these URLs, and whenever that URL pattern is loaded, like google.com, the extension code gets loaded into it. And you can kind of specify at what point in time it gets loaded. It can get loaded right away. It can get loaded on DOM ready, and so on. And you can also add your own CSS and so on. Then there is something that's quite specific to the Chrome browser. There's the extension page, which is the page that you use if you want to change like the extension settings. So it's a full-blown page that's presented to the user, and the URL to that page is of the format Chrome sort of : / and then the extension ID. So you can kind of provide some HTML and JavaScript that the user can interact with that isn't loaded from the server but is loaded from their local machine. And you can also have like content pages like that show images, for example. So you can have a content script that goes in and loads an image, or like injects an image into a page like google.com and replaces the Google logo with like the F-Secure logo. But the F-Secure logo is actually an image that can be packaged up as part of the extension. That's available like locally rather than being loaded from a server. Yeah, and all these different parts of the extension are somewhat isolated from each other, and they're isolated in different ways. So the background page can't really talk directly to anything else, and it can't modify the content. It can, however, send messages, and other parts of the application can pick up those messages. So a content script can pick up a message, and the actual website itself that you're visiting can also pick up the messages generated by the background page. And in the same way, the website can generate a message that can then be picked up by the content script on the background page. Content scripts also have isolated JavaScript scopes, so you can go in and modify, like, I don't know, or function prototype, and those changes will only apply to the JavaScript code within the content script. It won't actually sort of affect the JavaScript running within the page, so the page will keep running just fine regardless of the changes. There is one way in which the content scripts can interact with the page, which doesn't involve passing messages, and that's through the DOM. But as we all know, putting too much sort of data into the DOM is just a bad practice. But you can do it for some things. That's a kind of a bidirectional thing in Chrome. So you can have a content script modify the DOM, and you can have the website modify the DOM and have those changes picked up by the content script. In Firefox, it's a lot harder. So there's a kind of a read-only version of the DOM that your content script can get. And if you make changes to it, those changes won't actually be reflected in the actual DOM that's displayed to the user. But you can use that to read stuff out. And it's kind of marked as deprecated, but I think it's been like that for a few years. Doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. Yeah, and because using message passing, everything is kind of asynchronous. So, something happens in the background, and then eventually it arrives in the content script, and vice versa. But you can kind of build your own RPC bridge. So, in a way, like these security constraints are there to prevent sort of malicious scripts from abusing extensions, because obviously, if an extension is implemented badly or in a sloppy manner, then if there weren't these kind of bridges or like kind of these gates between the different parts of the extension, you could have a rogue site get access to like your local file system or something scary like that. This kind of means that you have to actively enable those communications. But if you know what you're doing, you can actually open up the communication channels in such a way that any part of the page or any part of the extension can do whatever the heck it pleases. Let's talk about what the APIs look like, and I'm kind of listing them from best to worst. So in Chrome, you have more or less up-to-date documentation that's fairly comprehensive and comes with examples. Firefox, the story isn't anywhere near as good. You actually have multiple different APIs. There's like a native API, which looks very much like the DOM API, so very long sort of method names and scary definitions and lots of undocumented features. And typically when you Google for Firefox add-on documentation, that's what you get. they've been trying to like make this easier. So there's this project called Jetstrap, which is a wrapper around the native Firefox sort of extension APIs. It provides somewhat limited functionality, but a much cleaner interface to it. Jetstrap at the moment is the library. So if you're writing a Firefox extension that you want to run an older version of Firefox, every extension that uses Jetstrap includes Jetstrap with it. But in subsequent releases of Firefox, Jetstrap is actually going to be part of Firefox. So you won't need to do that. In fact, there's some detection code already inside the Jetstrap library that gets bundled with an extension that sort of says, if Jetstrap is available within the browser, use that. If not, fall back to this version that's kind of pre-packaged with the extension. The downside is if you're building, I mean, it's strongly advisable that you build Firefox extensions on top of Jetstrap. But the downside is you have to bundle this massive library. So if all you want to do is like replace the new tab page, you have to package up like 150 kilobytes of zipped up JavaScript with it. Because if you don't do that, then you have to manually pick out the bits of Jetstrap that you need and don't need, and that's kind of hard. And there's also yeah. Um, no, I guess it's not a major problem, but it just doesn't seem like the most efficient way to go about it. It's kind of like it's almost like the NPM approach where everybody has their own dependency. It's kind of okay up to a point, but the problem isn't the size. The problem is more like your browser has to actually go and evaluate all that code for your extension, right, every time it runs. So if you have like 10 extensions that each bundle a separate Jetstrap with it, then you are kind of evaluating a whole bunch of code multiple times over for nothing. It's just not a very elegant solution in my opinion. I think they could have done. One would have thought there would have been a cleaner way of doing that. Yeah. Then there's the sort of question of documentation. For some bizarre reason, every single computer I've tried this on, the Mozilla.org documentation site defaults to Mongolian, which I do not understand. And then yeah, yeah. Oh, is it? Sorry. Yeah, I'm like mixing up Bootstrap and Jetstrap, right? Yeah. So I'll make a change to the slide. Thanks for pointing that out. Cool. Yeah. So what was I gonna say? Yeah. So yeah, and some things that you think should be really simple to do, like in Chrome, for example, adding a button for your extension next to the URL bar, that's a really simple thing. Like in fact, you don't even need to call any code. It's just a configuration parameter that you have in a manifest file. In Firefox, by default, extensions get access to this extension toolbar, which is this tiny thing where the extensions are like 16 by 16 pixels in the bottom right corner of your browser that nobody notices, and I think the whole bar is switched off by default in Firefox. So the moment you want to do that, you have to like step outside of Jetpack and start using the native APIs. And those native APIs are like, all of a sudden it's much more difficult. It's not a case of adding one line to a config file. You have to like write initialization, destruction code, and you have to take into account the fact that the bar can, like the icons in the toolbar in Firefox can be different sizes. So there's no documentation on like what are the CSS rules for which image to show depending on the size of the toolbar. You kind of have to reverse engineer and figure all that out for yourself. So it's a whole lot of fun. Like the things that you thought would have been easy become surprisingly hard. But it's not the hardest environment to program in. It gets better. So we actually built an extension almost on a dare because we try to see who can do it faster, whether Alex can build an Opera extension or me a Firefox extension. So we actually made one for Opera as well. And in Opera, the story is even worse. So there are no docs. You kind of have to reverse engineer, figure it out for itself. And actually, Opera has completely ditched its current kind of browser and engine and runtime. They've moved to WebKit, and the next version of the Opera browser, which is called Opera.next, which is going to have Chrome's extension APIs, except that they implement them only partially. So, for example, you can't get access to browser history or a bunch of other things. And they've spent a lot of effort on this weird automated tool that goes and translates your old Opera extension automatically into a new extension that works in Opera.next and Chrome. And it's like, why did you guys make it so complicated? Yeah, and then IE, oh, that's like we haven't written an IE plugin or extension yet, but we may do. Essentially, the technology in IE, like in Windows, like at low level, goes back like 20, 30 years. So if you start digging deep down, it's C++ and turtles all the way down. There's crazy acronyms like browser host objects, component object model, which I haven't touched in like 10 years, ATL, and so on. It is possible to kind of write managed extensions using C# and .NET, but there isn't like a proper framework for doing it. There are some like open source ones that you kind of need to work with and modify it to your needs. Also, the installation process isn't that easy. It's actually an executable that you download that goes in and modifies the registry and so on. Okay, so those are the APIs. What are the dev tools like? So actually, the situation is a bit different here. With Chrome, it's very easy. The dev tools are the Chrome dev tools that you're familiar with. The one thing that you should probably notice is that the extension, the background page is where most of the action happens in an extension, and you can actually open up the background page. So a normal user doesn't see it, but if you go to the Chrome extension page, so Chrome / extensions, check the developer mode thing, you click a link for the background page, and that opens up in a separate browser, and you can open up the developer tools, the console, and you get all the goodies there. You can also develop using just your local file system. So you just point your browser towards a directory, and the extension files all sit there. You specify like a manifest file, which is like the metadata about your extension, entry point, and so on. And you can like quite happily deploy it and use it locally. With Firefox, it's quite complicated. There is a tool called CFX, but it doesn't run out of the box on Windows. It does run on Linux and Macs though, after you kind of fight it for a little bit. And they've tried to make things easy by creating like a web-based kind of a graphical user interface for making extensions called, which you can find at builder.addons.mozilla.org. But it's kind of limited, and if you're using like revision control like Git, any changes you make there, you need to constantly keep on copy pasting into your local file, and it's actually not that easy to use that thing. With Opera, it's actually the easiest. You don't even need to kind of go to the extension page and reload the extension every time you update it. You just drag the config.xml file for that extension to the browser, and that automatically like reinstalls it and updates it. I wish other things were as easy in Opera though. Then there's deployment. So you can either self-host the extension, or you can put it up onto the browser vendor's portal, and you definitely want to put it on the portal in the store, because that's how people find you. So that's one of the other nice things about extensions, is just like with native mobile apps, you can actually get kind of a distribution channel for free, and that's something that we've been quite lucky to get through the Chrome store, for example. So if you do decide to distribute it yourself, you have to kind of have keys to actually encrypt the extension file, and you can produce a CRX file which you can host anywhere. Or if you want to do it through the web store, then you need to upload a zip file of just the source to the Chrome web store, and I guess they run some sort of a code analysis there to make sure you're not doing anything out of the ordinary. With Firefox, you have to use the CFX tool, and then it produces an XPI file, and then you upload it to addons.mozilla.org. You need to use like the Persona account to log into Mozilla, and that's like a story in itself. It's like Persona is not easy to use. There's like a bunch of different logins that you need to be able to actually use the mozilla.org website. And then with Opera, also it's upload a zip to addons.mozilla.org. So once you've done that, you actually need to kind of distribute your extension, but some stores require for the extension to be reviewed. So with Chrome, there is no review process. It's just like with Android Market. So the moment you put it up there, it's live. They do need you to pay. They do want you to pay $5 to kind of, I don't know, verify your identity or something, but that's about it. So I don't know. I guess I'd be pretty wary of a lot of the extensions that don't have many ratings or users on the Chrome Web Store, because God knows what's in there. And those extensions can do a lot of nasty stuff to you that we might not be aware of. The update process for Chrome extensions is great. So it kind of, the browser automatically checks for updates, and within a day, typically, that update is available to the user. So you just upload a new version, bump up the version in the manifest, and you're good to go. And then with Firefox, there's a human in the loop. So they actually, after you upload it, they review it, and it takes about 10 days for them to do it. There's some sort of a fast track. They don't take any money for it, but they don't do a full review. So the extension kind of looks like it hasn't been properly approved by Firefox. But what's interesting is that the moment you upload it, it's actually available for download from the site, up until the point when the reviewer decides to reject it. So at that point, it goes back down again. Again, like, what's the logic there? I don't understand. But the nice thing is that they are quite quick. So once they've reviewed it once, and they've given you comments, if you get back to them like the next day with an update, then the day after that, it's good to go. Also, the Firefox review process is very transparent. So they have an IRC channel. You can just log in and chat to the guys doing the reviews. They do insist on you like having a login and password for them, so that they can like, if your extension requires a login, they don't go through the process of logging in themselves. So that's something to keep in mind. Updating, though, is kind of hard, so users need to sort of semi-manually update their extensions. So it's a bit of a nightmare with outdated extensions in Firefox. With Opera, it takes even longer. There's also a human in the loop, and we haven't ever had to update the Opera extension, so I have no idea how it works. But now things are very much in transition, so unless you're feeling a bit masochistic, I suggest you don't release an Opera extension. So that's kind of the review process. What about distribution? So in the Chrome Web Store, you have a dashboard that shows you rudimentary stats. So you can see how many views your extension has had, like how many times people have actually looked at the extension, how many times it's been installed. Unfortunately, that stats thing was like offline for us for about 6 weeks, so you shouldn't rely on it. But what you can also do is you can actually paste in a Google Analytics ID, and you can see like real-time stats and Google Analytics output for your extension page, which is actually quite useful. Because sometimes you want to drive traffic to the actual extension page and not your site, right? Like it's easier for people to go and install it there. Other thing is the ratings, reviews, and keywords do drive traffic. So you just have people like searching for random stuff that end up hitting your extension page and trying it out. And I guess one thing worth noting is that people don't really seem to care about the privacy settings. Our extension requires quite a lot. We have to we're able to make XHR requests to any server and all that kind of stuff, and people just go, yeah, whatever, it's fine. I trust these guys, which is kind of nice. Yeah, in Firefox you also get stats, a number of current installs, but again, it's all in Mongolian by default, so for some reason we're getting relatively little traffic. Hopefully it'll build up, but in general, Firefox usage and extension usage is quite low from what we've seen. With Opera, it's even worse though. So you don't get any stats, even though you list it in their directory. If you search for the extension by name, it doesn't come up, so the search engine is kind of broken. The only way to find Opera extensions is by Googling for them, and somehow we still occasionally get people installing the Opera extension. It's a mystery to me how they discover it. One other final thing is I was dissing IE earlier, but IE have like an IE add-ons gallery, so it's not an extension as such, but you can create put up some metadata so that your website can be pinned to the desktop on Windows 8, and you can also implement search providers. And we actually did that, even though we didn't build the extension, and we've been getting loads of traffic from IE users in the US. They are a strange breed of users. I can tell you all the details about their behavior patterns over a beer, but you do get a lot of traffic from that. So, if you can't be bothered implementing an IE extension, it might be worth considering building an IE kind of a pinned site add-on or a search provider or whatever. Okay, so now I wanted to show a couple of examples of extensions that we've built. So the first one is a meetings extension. Who knows meetings, the company? Yeah. All right, cool. So how do Alex, can you help me like just duplicate the screen to the other one? Yeah, because I can't be like looking back and talking at the same time. It'll get confusing. If you just yeah, if you do that. Yeah, so that's what the extension is. Oh, no. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so the meetings extension is one of these examples where the meetings meet me button is injected in different sites. So once you install the extension, it just kind of sits in the background. And whenever you visit Gmail, Highrise, CRM system, or LinkedIn, um, there's a button that's added to the website, and by clicking that, you can schedule a meeting inside meetings with that person. Um, I can show you how it works, but or how it looks. But the tricky part about that was that I mean, this is how it looks. So here I am inside Highrise, and there's this button. This button isn't actually part of Highrise. It's the meetings extension that puts that button in. And for like static pages, it's quite easy to do because the DOM is ready. Like the DOM comes from the server, so your extension just you know applies a CSS selector and kind of injects its own bit of HTML in the right part of the page. Easy peasy. But if you want to do it in Gmail, which is a single page app, then injecting the button there is a lot harder because it's a single page app, so the DOM keeps changing all the time. So you need to actually watch for DOM mutation events and eventually kind of eject the button at the right places and also remove it when it doesn't need to be there. And then when you click it, you actually get taken to meetings, and if you're not signed up, you can sign up, and there's like a little drop down menu as well, so you can log in, and it changes depending on whether you logged in or not. Cool. So that's the meetings extension, and then the Start HQ extension is essentially the first thing it does is it replaces your new tab, which will hopefully load. So I'll sign in. And on your new tab, you get this launcher of your app. So it's kind of like the Chrome new tab, but way cooler. And another thing that the extension does is it populates all the items in your launcher against our application directory and compares that against your history. So we don't send your whole history to the server. That would be very foolish. What we actually do is we send our whole directory down to the browser, which is foolish, but a bit less so. Fortunately, we kind of send it in a compressed form, so it doesn't take too much space, and we kind of compare hashes of URLs, so it's all very efficient and very quick. So when you sign up, this gets populated, and you get all sorts of cool things. And then as a kind of a final thing, I wanted to show you something we haven't released yet. In fact, the stuff you see here isn't out yet. It'll be out later this week. We got these new feature called deep links, and then also multiple screens, so you can kind of do that. So you can, for example, directly from here click compose, and that actually goes and opens up your Gmail compose box. So that's kind of handy. But the cool thing I wanted to show you was this. So if I go in here and I type in Helsinki.js, then we go to a search page, and bam, I'm getting results from all the apps I have in my launcher. So here are my emails. Here's some links from GitHub and so on. And if I type in Start HQ, then I get like my email inbox. So the Sentry, the thing that Alex was talking about, looks like there was an error that Sentry reported. And then there's answers from Quora, and then there's stuff from GitHub. You can see profiles from AngelList and so on. And at the moment, we have about 10, 15 apps that we support, but we're going to quickly add support for more. And all this stuff is possible thanks to the extension that's running in the background. And you don't need to kind of give OAuth access rights or in any other way sign into the other apps. As long as you're signed into them within this browser, we get to show you the results. Cool. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. And if you want to get early access to some of the stuff I've shown you, check out starthq.com. Thank you. And I guess